New recruit, one soldier muttered. Probably an intel clerk. Another laughed. Look at her. She couldn't even make it through Army sniper school. The range at Mirzai Highlands rippled with heat as Lieutenant Elara Kade stepped onto the firing line. She didn't respond to the whispers, didn't even glance their way. The sun glared against the sand, and the desert wind tugged at her hair as she laid the Barrett MRAD Mk22 across the bench. The murmurs continued behind her. She's not even Army sniper school. Must have pulled strings to get here. Someone snickered. Bet she doesn't even know what a mill correction is. Elara said nothing. She adjusted her Night Force ATAC 735X56 scope and keyed in readings from a Kestrel 5700 Elite barometric pressure. Wind vectors. Humidity. The target was a steel plate glinting faintly more than 210 meters away, nearly invisible through the shimmering heat. From the control tower, Major Trent Rourke looked on, unimpressed. She requested the range at max distance. Must be testing calibration. His aide frowned. Sir, her clearance tag, it's helix coded. Rourke turned. Startled. Helix, that's beyond my chain. Below. The range sergeant raised his voice over the wind. Target 4210 meters, crosswind 9 knots. West quarter, Elara's gloved fingers moved with surgical calm. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, and when she spoke, her tone was level. Cold. Deliberate, compensate. Coriolis 1.2 mils. Ready on my mark. Laughter rippled behind her again. Coriolis. What is she? NASA. Then the desert cracked open. The MRAD thundered, its recoil echoing off the ridgeline. 5 seconds later, a faint metallic ping drifted back across the valley. Then silence. The range officer blinked. Stunned. Impact confirmed. Center hit. Every conversation stopped. Someone whispered, "No way." Rourke leaned forward in disbelief. Run it again. Elara adjusted half a click. Fired again. Another direct impact, same target. Same impossible range. The silence this time was heavier. It wasn't awe. It was realization. Rourke descended from the tower, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Lieutenant," he said, stopping beside her. "Your file says logistics officer." That true Elara didn't look up. On paper. And off paper, she locked the bolt home. Her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have the clearance to ask that." Sir, that night, the Mirzai wind still carried the echo of her shots. Staff Sergeant Mason Reed found her in the armory, field stripping the MRAD under dim light. You know they're still talking about it. He said, 2 hits at 4 clicks. Some say you spoofed the telemetry. Elara didn't look up. Then they don't understand math. Mason hesitated. I've seen good shooters, but you are compensating for multiple wind layers. You read the terrain like a map. Her eyes lifted briefly. Wind speaks louder than men. He smirked. You don't talk like a soldier. I'm not one. When the base finally went quiet. Elara keyed a hidden frequency on her wrist terminal. The small display blinked once encrypted channel active. Spectre 9 verified. A calm voice answered through static observation phase complete. Proceed to next stage. Her reply was simple. Copy. Cover intact. She looked out toward the empty desert. The moonlight traced the ridge where she'd made the impossible shot. Tomorrow, they'd call it a fluke. Next week, they'd start asking questions. By the time they found the answers, she'd already be gone. What happens when this quiet lieutenant breaks cover will change everything you think you know about loyalty. Silence, and the shot that defied physics. FOB Kestrel slept under a pale desert moon, but Lieutenant Elara Kade was wide awake. Her rifle lay stripped across the table, each component cleaned with surgical precision. Outside, Laughter and music drifted from the barracks, the sound of soldiers who didn't know a legend was sitting in the dim light, assembling her weapon like a ritual. She paused only when Staff Sergeant Mason Reed entered. His boots hesitated at the doorway. "You don't sleep either?" he asked. "Sleep dulls reaction time," she said flatly. He leaned against the frame. "You really expect me to believe you made that 4-2-10-meter shot by—" Luck. Her hands never stopped moving. "Luck is what amateurs call preparation." Mason smirked, but there was curiosity behind it now. Not mockery. "You've got equations written on that notebook. Wind coefficients, barometric deltas, even Earth rotation. What is this? A science fair project?" Elara looked up at him. "It's called the Spectre equation. It's how we turn chaos into math." He frowned. We Elara closed the notebook. Forget I said that. The next morning, Major Rourke summoned them both to the briefing tent. On the wall, new intel flickered, Crimson Viper PMC columns regrouping deeper into the Mirzai Highlands. The defector extraction wasn't over, it had just changed shape. "They're building counter-sniper positions," Rourke said. "Grim. We need overwatch and forward recon before Mason could volunteer." Elara spoke. "I'll take point. Sergeant Reed will assist." Mason blinked. "Assist with respect." "Ma'am, you barely know your sight alignment's good," she interrupted. "Your trigger discipline isn't. That's fixable." The base fell quiet. Even Rourke raised an eyebrow, a lieutenant giving orders like a field commander. She continued. "We move at 2300, low profile. If they're hunting for ghosts, we'll give them one." They left the wire that night, two figures swallowed by the desert. Mason followed her pace deliberate, measured, every movement calculated. Her gear was stripped of insignia, her rifle wrapped in desert cloth, optics calibrated to lunar light. She moved like someone who had done this too many times to count. At 2 kilometers out, they reached a rocky plateau. Elara set up her spotting scope and began reading the air. "Crosswind 12 knots, quartering left, temp drop 3 degrees per hour. Mirage distortion medium," Mason muttered. "You don't even need a weather station." "Do you?" She gave a faint smirk. "I am the weather station." Hours later, the first muzzle flash bloomed on the horizon, enemy counter-sniper fire. Mason hit the dirt. Elara stayed perfectly still. "They're zeroing the plateau." He hissed. "Good," she said. "They think we're there." She pointed to a second ridge. "That's where we'll actually be." "How do you? Because that's where I'd shoot from," she said simply. They relocated under cover of darkness. When the next volley came, her calculations unfolded like choreography. She adjusted 1-1. 2 mils for elevation, half MOA for spin drift, exhaled and fired. The distant flash winked out. "First shooter neutralized," she said softly. Mason's jaw tightened. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," she replied. "Predictable." When they returned to Kestrel at dawn, sand coated their uniforms, and silence followed them like a shadow. Soldiers watched as Elara passed, eyes filled with a mixture of respect and unease. Rourke met her outside the ops tent. "Nice work out there. Lieutenant, or should I say, Master Sergeant." The words hit Mason like a shot. What did he just say? Rourke's gaze hardened. "You didn't think I wouldn't verify your file, did you?" Spectre 9. Elara's expression didn't change. "Then you know why I was assigned here. I know you shouldn't exist on paper," Rourke said. "But someone wanted you in this sector." He turned to Mason. "And someone else wanted him with you." Mason felt the air shift like the wind before a storm. He looked at Elara. "Who are you really?" She holstered her sidearm. Voice calm. "I'm the reason you're still breathing." "Sergeant." She walked away toward the flight line. where a MH-60M Black Hawk waited under rising sunlight. Rourke's words followed him. Wherever she goes next, you'll want to follow. Mason watched the helicopter lift off, kicking dust across the runway. And for the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't chasing glory anymore. He was chasing answers. What happens when Mason discovers the truth about Spectre 9 will change everything you think you know about loyalty. Silence and the cost of precision. The Mirzai Highlands shimmered under a rising sun, the horizon bending in heat and dust. From her ridge position, Lieutenant Elara Kade adjusted her Barrett MRAD Mk22, her face expressionless, her breath controlled to the rhythm of distant wind. Below, a Crimson Viper PMC convoy wound through the valley, 3 armored trucks, 1 unmarked technical, and a threat codenamed Kingmaker. The target was moving fast, but Elara's world had slowed. Every variable wind vectors, air density, spin drift unfolded inside her head like an equation she'd solved 1,000 times. Beside her, Staff Sergeant Mason Reed scanned through binoculars. "You're not serious," he muttered. "That's over 4 clicks. No one's ever made that shot." Elara didn't answer. She slid the bolt forward, locked it, and read the Kestrel's numbers like scripture. Wind 9 knots. Quartering left. Drop correction 1.6 mils. Delay time 5.3 seconds. Mason frowned. "You're calculating Coriolis manually." She smirked faintly. "You can't trust the app at this range. Through the night force at AKR." The world narrowed, target in crosshairs, wind ripple visible through the mirage. She exhaled, body still as glass. The trigger broke clean. The shot cracked across the canyon. 5 seconds later, an explosion bloomed at the convoy's front, flipping the lead truck sideways in a roar of fire and sand. Mason flinched. "You hit the engine block." Elara was already loading the second round. 1 truck stops 1 man. The engine stops the mission. Another thunderous shot. The rear vehicle detonated, blocking escape. In the chaos, Kingmaker's escort scrambled too slow. Rourke's voice erupted through comms. "Spectre team. Confirm engagement." Elara's tone stayed calm. "Convoy neutralized. No civilian collateral. Extraction path secure." Silence followed. Then Rourke's quiet disbelief. "Jesus Christ. That's 4210 meters. Who are you?" Hours later, at FOB Kestrel. The footage replayed across the operations tent. Operators gathered around the feed mouths, open, heads shaking. Rourke stood motionless. 2 rounds. He murmured. 0 miss. Crosswind at 9 knots. No stabilization system. No spotter assist. A technician looked up. Pale. "Sir, the angle compensation data, that's a Spectre protocol." Rourke's gaze hardened. "And those are supposed to be decommissioned, back at the ridge." Mason and Elara packed their gear in silence. The smoke from the burning convoy curled skyward, fading into the horizon. Mason finally spoke. "That wasn't training. Was it?" She didn't look up. "No, it was proof. Proof of what that physics bends, if you know how to ask." He laughed once, dryly. "That's not science, that's magic." Elara met his eyes, calm and unblinking. "No, that's math with consequences." When they returned to Kestrel, the base was buzzing. Some saluted her, others just stared. Mason trailed behind as she walked straight into the command tent. Rourke was waiting with a tablet in hand. "Spectre 9 clearance," he said, sliding it across the table. "Top-tier ghost unit. It was erased 5 years ago. But you—" He stopped. The screen showed biometric confirmation. Kade. Elara L. Linked to Spectre 9 Task Force Helix. He looked up sharply. "Your lieutenant's rank, it's a cover, isn't it?" Elara said nothing. "I've seen field assets." Rourke pressed. "None like you." You operate with deniable authorization presidential chain. You're not supposed to exist. She finally answered. Neither is Spectre 9. But sometimes the world needs things that don't exist. That night, the range was empty again. Elara sat alone beside her rifle, running her thumb over the Spectre medallion she kept hidden in her gear, a small emblem engraved with an impossible number, 4210-. Mason approached quietly. They're saying it's a world record, he said. The longest confirmed shot. She smiled faintly. It wasn't confirmed. He frowned. You mean it wasn't official? She looked up at the stars. I mean, it wasn't my longest. Mason froze. The wind carried silence between them, heavy, unspoken, electric. From the shadows near the perimeter, a low hum broke the night-encrypted comms signal. Spectre coded. Elara tapped her earpiece. Observation successful. A calm voice said, Target neutralized. Phase 2 authorized. Proceed to Shara Fold. Her jaw tightened. Understood. Mason heard the faint echo, his instincts flaring. Phase 2. What's happening? Elara slung her rifle over her shoulder. We're moving out. Tomorrow at dawn. We're into the fold, she said. Where ghosts are born. The next mission takes them deep into the Shara Fold, where shadows move, and even the most precise shot might not be enough. The Shara Fold was a jagged labyrinth of wind-swept rock and dying sunlight, the kind of place maps called unreachable. But that's exactly where Lieutenant Elara Kade and Staff Sergeant Mason Reed were headed, deep into territory, where signals vanished and ghosts had names. They had inserted by MH-60M Black Hawk before dawn, flying nap of the earth through dust and turbulence, skimming the terrain like shadows, trying to outrun the sunrise. The mission was simple on paper: locate a downed drone carrying encrypted intel and extract before Crimson Viper's reinforcements arrived. In reality, nothing about it was simple. By midday, they were pinned behind a ridge, trapped between two converging patrols. Mason crouched low, adjusting his M110A1, scanning the high ground. 2 fire teams closing in, range 400 meters and tightening. Elara was already working calculations on her notepad. Wind speed, distance, angle of defilade. They're herding us, she murmured. Herding us, we're into their kill box. She replied, but they made a mistake. Mason glanced at her. Which is, they think they're hunting soldiers. They're hunting mathematicians. She moved like water slipping from cover, repositioning her MRAD across a jagged outcrop. Mason followed, heart hammering. The first squad crested the ridge. Before they could react, her rifle cracked once, twice precise, surgical. 2 helmets dropped in unison. The rest scattered. Mason took a breath and started firing to suppress. You make it look easy. Elara's tone was calm. It's not about easy. It's about inevitability. When the final echo faded, the desert fell silent again. They moved toward the wreck site, a twisted husk of carbon fiber and classified tech half buried in the sand. Mason crouched beside it, scanning. This drone isn't recon. It's AI-assisted targeting, advanced model. Elara nodded, brushing away sand until a small drive compartment appeared. That's why Command wanted it back. Whatever's on this, someone would kill to keep it buried. She extracted the encrypted module, tucked it into a shock-proof case, and sealed it under her vest. Mission complete. Time to vanish. But before they could move, Mason froze. Elara, on the far ridge. A dozen figures appeared, tactical silhouettes, moving with discipline and speed. Their armor wasn't enemy issue. Their weapons were Western. Those aren't insurgents. Mason whispered. Elara's jaw tightened. Private military contractors. But not Crimson Viper. Then who people who shouldn't exist? She said, Same as me. The ambush came like lightning. Suppressed fire cracked from 3 angles. Mason returned fire while Elara dragged him behind a rock wall. Bullets snapped through stone inches from her face. Think, she muttered. Scanning terrain. They're using staggered arcs they trained under Helix doctrine. Mason's stomach dropped. Helix doctrine. You mean your own people? Elara reloaded calmly. Not my people, my replacements. The firefight turned chaotic. Dust explosions, ricochets, controlled bursts. Mason covered her as she dashed across open ground, set a thermobaric charge, and detonated it. The blast flattened a portion of the ridge, scattering the attackers long enough for them to retreat deeper into the fold. When they finally stopped, both were breathing hard, armor streaked with dust and blood. Mason tore open his med kit. You're hit. It's through and through, she said, tightening her belt as a tourniquet. I've had worse. He looked at her, anger in his voice. You knew this wasn't a recovery mission. Her silence was the only confirmation he needed. What was on that drone? Elara proof. She said, of programs that were never shut down, of people who didn't die when the files said they did. You're saying Task Force Helix never ended. She interrupted. They just went underground. I was one of them until I refused a kill order. That's why I don't officially exist. As the desert wind howled through the canyon, Mason finally saw the truth in her eyes. Beneath all the precision and control, there was exhaustion, the kind born from too many missions that were never supposed to happen. A faint hum broke the moment. Overhead, a Scan Eagle drone passed its infrared beam sweeping the canyon. They've found us, Mason said. Elara checked her watch. We've got 4 minutes until airstrike. What's the plan? She unslung her rifle, loading her last magazine. Same as always. Buy time. For what? For Thunderhead? She said. Extraction's coming, but we have to give them a corridor. Mason scanned the horizon. We're outnumbered and pinned. That's not a corridor, that's suicide. Elara glanced back at him, a small, almost human smile breaking through the dirt and blood. It's what I was trained for. As she spoke, distant engines thundered the approach of AC-130J Ghost Rider gunship support. She raised her infrared strobe, marking their position with pinpoint precision. Danger, close strike. Mason realized. We're inside the blast radius. Trust me, she said simply, echoing the same words she'd once used before that impossible convoy shot. The sky erupted. The Ghost Rider's cannons tore open the valley, shaking the ground with apocalyptic force through the inferno. Elara fired again and again, her rifle rhythm matching the gunship's roar, a duet of chaos and control. When the firestorm subsided, the canyon was still. Smoke drifted like ghosts over shattered rock. Mason turned to her, voice shaking. They'll send more. Elara reloaded, eyes fixed on the burning horizon. Then we'll be ready. The sound of approaching rotors grew louder, not the Ghost Rider this time, but an inbound Black Hawk. Rourke's voice cracked over comms. Spectre team, this is command. Prepare for hot extract. Repeat. Hot extract. Elara exhaled, her rifle still warm against her shoulder. Phase 2's over, she said. But the real war's about to begin. The desert night was still burning when Lieutenant Elara Kade stepped off the helicopter ramp. The rotors thundered behind her, throwing dust across the landing pad at FOB Kestrel, but her focus never wavered. She moved like someone who'd seen too much and survived anyway. Across the tarmac, Major Trent Rourke waited with a single file in hand. The folder bore no name, no insignia, just the symbol of a double helix etched in silver. You were right, he said quietly. Helix didn't end. It evolved. Half of what we fought today were our own ghosts. Elara nodded, expression unreadable. Then we finish what we started. Rourke studied her for a long moment. Command wants you off the grid. Recovery. Debrief. She shook her head. You can't debrief what doesn't exist. He sighed. They'll never credit you for this. I don't need credit, she said. Just silence until it's needed again. Later, in the armory. Elara laid her Barrett MRAD Mk22 on the bench one final time. She wiped it clean with methodical care. Like a ritual, Mason Reed entered quietly, his own uniform still streaked with dust and smoke. You ever think about walking away? He asked. She smiled faintly. Every day. But then I remember who pays the price when people like us stop showing up. He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a small silver medallion engraved with the Spectre insignia. You drop this on the ridge. Elara looked at it, then at him. Keep it, she said. You earned it. He frowned. That's not how this works. It is now. They stood in silence. Two soldiers bound by something deeper than rank, by the understanding that legends aren't born. They're built from every choice that could have gone wrong, but didn't, when she finally turned to leave. Mason called after her. What happens now? She stopped at the door. Now you make the shot no one else can make. And when it breaks, you learn to rebuild yourself around the recoil. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Her voice softened. And Mason, don't become me. Become better. Then she was gone, swallowed by the hum of aircraft and the pale horizon. Weeks later, a secure briefing file landed on Rourke's desk. Operation Spectre continuation. New asset assigned. Call sign Spectre 2. Attached was a single photo, Mason Reed standing alone on a mountain ridge. Scope raised, eyes steady on the impossible distance. The legend hadn't ended. It had multiplied. In war, legends fade, but legacies don't. Precision isn't just about hitting the target, it's about knowing when not to pull the trigger.